Good morning and afternoon. We are glad to welcome you to the Movement Café, which is our Wednesday, third Wednesday of the month, a chance for folks involved in the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement or curious about it or invested in creation care in the United Methodist Church or adjacent, right? This is about the good creation and getting to know each other. I just want to welcome all of you. It always takes us a couple minutes to roll in, so just want to encourage everybody to share who they are, where they are, if they've had a busy annual conference season and they're ready to take a breath, or they're just now gearing up to be a part of their annual conference. Those are types of things that we need to just breathe through. So I encourage you to we're going to have a really wonderful conversation today about the earth and each other and climate change and climate response and how we come together at this edge time here in the cafe today. And we have this wonderful guest, Leah Rampy, with us. And of course, we'll introduce all of that in a minute. Right now, I'd love to hear about you. So please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself and where you're from. If something wonderful in the creation justice world has happened recently, maybe your annual conference passed a resolution you're pleased about, or maybe it didn't, and you need a little bit of a lament. Those things are all okay and welcome, and we're glad you're here. So my name is Reverend Rashenda Fairhurst, and I am a member of the Pacific Northwest Conference. I live in Oregon, Southern Oregon, and I'm really grateful to have found the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. So I one thing that we wanted to start right off with today, just because this is a really important day in many ways, but it is Juneteenth. And Juneteenth just cannot be a more important day for Americans to take a moment to reflect. We have, a history of slavery, of people taking people in slavery and holding them against their will in this country. And, you know, whoo, boy, there's a lot of work to be done around that still. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to raise up prayers on Juneteenth, prayers of thanksgiving that freedom came and finally happened, even in Galveston, Texas, where people had been held for 2.5 years longer than they should have been. So we have a prayer to share together to do this right away. It is a prayer written by Derek Weber, who is with the discipleship in the Board of Discipleship, Greater Board of Discipleship. And it is a responsive prayer. So we're going to read the piece, and I'm going to share my screen for the responsive part, which we just shared together. Let me share my screen now. Dawn is going to go ahead and read our prayer. And this is our response right here. Lord of all people, Lord of all nations, hear our prayer.
Okay, thank you, Rashenda. And having lived in Texas all those years before I moved to North Carolina, we celebrated this before, as she mentioned, before everybody else, because Juneteenth did start in Galveston. Okay, to the Creator of all races and peoples who loves each of us for our uniqueness, we offer our prayers of petition. For those who have struggled in the past and continue to do so today for civil rights, economic justice, and the elimination of discrimination based on race, nationality, or religion, we pray. Lord of all
Lord of all
nations, hear our
nations,
prayer.
hear our prayer.
For the conversion of the hearts and minds of those who allow another's race to influence their relationships and limit their openness, we pray.
Lord
Lord
of
of
all
all
people,
nations,
Lord of all nations, hear our prayer.
hear our prayer. That we may work to influence the attitudes of others by expressly rejecting racial or ethnic stereotypes, slurs, and jokes, and be affirming of the cultural contributions of every racial, ethnic, and religious group in our world, we pray.
Lord of all
Lord of all
people,
people,
Lord of all
Lord of all
nations,
nations,
Hear our prayer.
hear our prayer.
That we may make a personal commitment to abolish social structures which inhibit economic, educational, and social advancement of the poor, we pray.
Lord of all
Lord of all
people,
people,
Lord of all nations, hear our prayer.
That we may work for decent working conditions, adequate income, housing, education, and health care for all people, we pray.
Lord of all
Lord of all
people,
people, Lord of all nations,
hear our prayer. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay. I had a few windows there pop up, which is par for the course. Great to see people introducing themselves in the chat. Oh my goodness, welcome, welcome, welcome. So what we're going to do now is I want to turn it over to Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt. She is a leader in the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement and really wonderful. She knows where all the pieces are. And so I'm going to turn it over to her to kind of share with us what is this thing. I know most of you know about it, but all the same to celebrate together the good thing that we're doing together. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hey everyone, I hope I'm coming through all right. I'm today joining from the Minnesota Zoo. The opportunity of Juneteenth meant that our kids all had the day off, and it is not raining, even though it's been raining for several weeks. And so we're taking the opportunity to be here. I hope I am doing this in a way modeling what our conversation will be about in terms of getting out into nature and really building connections there. But I know that it's also caused additional work for Rashinda and Dawn, and I appreciate that as well as I appreciate all of you being here today. The Creation Justice Movement, as many of you know, has emerged in the last few years as those of us who are United Methodists are exploring ways to put this particular institution to work to heal the relationship with nature and to work on addressing injustices that are impacting the planet and the people who are living in those areas. And so we are seeking for ways that we can work within the structures of the church, whether that be the local church, the annual conference, the boards and agencies of the church. There are a lot of ways that this institution that we call the United Methodist Church both has a strong commitment to this vocational work, as well as creates resources and opportunities for us to work together. And so over the years, we've developed a number of work teams and strategies to do that work. And so we've been busy, as many of you know, at General Conference and now this month at ANN conferences. And so this month, it felt particularly important that we take a bit of a breath, although there's still, work to do around showing up today, but to take an opportunity to really reflect on to take a cycle of reflection and action that we're not just, this isn't just a race or a marathon even, it's really our life's work, and that we need to be finding ways to pause and rest and trust those rhythms in our communities and in our lives. And so I encourage you, as you're hearing this conversation, as you hopefully read Leah's book, to build those spaces into your life. The other thing that I wanted to say just in terms of this conversation is that organizing is all about relationships, and that we also need to not forget that those relationships also with the earth, with the plants and animals in our neighborhoods, in our communities, that we need to be building relationships, and not just so that we know them, but that we can, as Leah says so powerfully, that we can be partner with the earth in healing, that we can help the helpers, that we can sometimes get out of the way, that we can listen and learn from Earth's wisdom. So I'm grateful for the really practical spiritual exercises that Leah offers that can help us deepen those relationships and listen better. And I do encourage you all to, if you have an opportunity to read the book, develop a book club, talk more and embed these practices into your life. So I think that's all I had to say for this moment. I'll turn it back to Rashinda for maybe a bit more of a bio, although you can read all about Leah in the, notes that we've shared prior to this event. Thank you all for being here today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathy. So yes, this is what we're doing here today. I am going to offer a bio for Leah, and then I'm going to toss a link in the chat, which will take you to her page and more about her. This is obviously abbreviated. She has an incredible list of things that she's engaged in and part of and drawing out for the world. And so I'm really, really grateful to have her here. So Leah Rampy is a writer, speaker, and retreat leader who weaves ecology, spirituality, personal stories, and practices to help others deepen their relationship to the natural world. She is the author of the award-winning Earth and Soul, Reconnecting Amid Climate Chaos, and she's co-authored and co-facilitated with Beth Norcross the 6-part video series on the spiritual wisdom of trees, which will soon be co-published as a book. And that will be in early 2025. She served as an executive director for Shalem Institute for Spiritual Formation. She's the founder and leader of Church in the Wild's Two Rivers, affiliated with the Wild Church Network, and has led over a dozen pilgrimages. She holds a doctorate in curriculum from Indiana University and is a member of the West Virginia Writers, where she lives in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, a co-housing village with a focus on community, environmental responsibility, and earth care. And that is just a taste of all the good things that she gets up to. And as promised, I'm going to drop this link and I'm going to turn it over to Leah. So glad you're here. And go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Rashinda. And thank you for the invitation to be with you today. I am really grateful to be among those of you who are working and attending and praying and giving good love toward creation justice. So thank you all for the work that you do. The layout of our time together is that I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the concepts that I've been holding dear in terms of writing the book and in the work that I do, and ones that I hope will resonate with you and your life and work. We'll invite some conversation then, because you know, I'm really clear that the fact I wrote a book does not mean that I hold all the answers. I maybe have a little more time to think of some of the questions, but I'd like for us to be in conversation to the degree that that works for you. And then we'll talk together a little bit more before I turn the program back over to your leaders here, who will be sharing more broadly some of the other things that are going on in your rich community. So let me begin with a story. This is a story that I first read from Michael Meade, a storyteller, and he is telling it as a story that comes from the White Mountain Apache. It's a story that's told in dark times. This is about an old woman who is weaving the world. She sits in a cave, probably one that is quite near to you, but one that is never found, no matter how hard people look. All day long, she sits at her loom, weaving the most beautiful garment, weaving the world. The only time that she leaves her work is when she gets up and walks to the back of the cave, where there is a cauldron over an open fire that is filled with seeds and nuts and roots of all of the things that make up this beautiful world. They're simmering over this fire, so it's important that she go back to stir them occasionally, because if she doesn't, they might scorch, and who knows what trouble that might cause. So she walks slowly to the back of the cave and stirs the cauldron. And as she is doing that, a black dog that has been sleeping at her feet wakens. The dog puts his mouth on one of the threads of the fabric and begins to pull. And he pulls and he pulls until that thread comes apart. And then he takes another and another. And while he is doing this, the old woman is slowly making her way back to the front of the cave. Of course, she's very old, so it takes a while. By the time she arrives, she sees all of her work lying in ruins, splayed across the floor, torn apart by the black dog. She looks, she pauses, and then slowly she bends and picks up one of the threads, sits again, and begins to weave. With a new image in mind, she begins to weave the most beautiful fabric of the world. Now, you might think that I'm going to go right from there to tell you what that all means. But of course, good stories have the benefit of meaning many things, and they mean different things to us at different times. So we'll leave that story hanging just a little bit, that cave that is not too far from you, with perhaps one noticing about the idea that we do live in times where threads are being frayed, where the old story is unraveling and the new has not yet fully emerged. I know that I'm telling you what you already know because of the work you do. You know that last year was the hottest in human history. Where I am right now is about 10 degrees above normal, and I expect that's true for many of you. Each of the past 12 months has set a record for land and ocean heat. The Northern Hemisphere saw its warmest summer and then its warmest winter last year. Heat is killing more people than all natural disasters combined. Our children will never know the earth as we knew it. 2/3 of the wildlife have vanished since 1970. The total population of North American birds has been cut by 1/3. 1 million plant and animal species, not 1 million total, 1 million plant and animal species are at risk of extinction in years, not decades, years. Only 11% of land ecosystems remain even functionally intact. Author Kathleen Dean Moore wrote poignantly, "Unless the world acts to stop extinctions, my grandchildren will have to tear out half the pages in their field guide." So I offer a quote from John Philip Newell, whose work you may be aware of. He's an author, Celtic spirituality author. He was a warden at Iona Abbey for a number of years, this beautiful sacred isle off the coast of Scotland. And he wrote, "We have forgotten who we are and fallen out of true relationship with the earth and with one another. Thus, the path to well-being is not about becoming something other than ourselves. It is about waking up to a knowledge that is deep in the very fabric of our being. Not that we have to become something new," he says, "but that we have to remember who we truly are." So the title of my book, Earth and Soul, is because I think that part of our journey is that of a soul journey, that true essence of who we are that perhaps has been covered over, forgotten, confused, and yet it's there, this deep, deep, beautiful gift that we have been given is always available to us, but it may take a journey. So the idea that we've forgotten who we are shows up in many ways. One of them, I think, is in the epidemic of loneliness that we see in this country. This was a quote by our Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. Even before COVID, he had declared that we are in an epidemic of loneliness. And there are many ramifications of loneliness. There are physical and psychological damage. The studies have shown that loneliness from other human beings is the equivalent for our health of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So this loneliness is eating at our heart and soul. But it's not that we're lonely for each other alone. We are also lonely for connections to the more than human world. We have defined nature as other than us. If you look at the definition of nature in the dictionary, you will see that many times it's defined as other than human. That's causing a culture of separation that's led to grief for us, but it also leads to hubris, the sense that we are not only separate from, but we are above, we are nearer to God, as Descartes would have said. And that, I think, is breaking our hearts. Now, I want to be clear that even though the invitation that I'm suggesting we might undertake has to do with reweaving or reconnecting, we never can be fully disconnected. We can never really separate ourselves. This is what Albert Einstein called an optical illusion of consciousness. This idea that we could separate ourselves from this incredible web of life. We, as all beings, are made of elements of stardust. We're 13.8 billion years of a common family tree. We drink rivers and rain. Our breath comes from algae, plants, trees. The photosynthesis of plants feeds our cells. We eat it and we become those plants. Our microbiome determines our health, our well-being, our thoughts, our emotions. It's hard to imagine that we could think we are one when we read about our microbiome that is all over, around, and within us and intrinsically interwoven with us. So how do we possibly hold this myth of separation that so dominates our Western culture? And of course, I will argue it's time to let go of that myth. It's time to reclaim, to reweave, reconnect, to reestablish, repair those frayed threads that bind us together. It is a world of amazing, elaborate, inspiring connections. And so perhaps we could begin that by sitting at the feet of some of our elders in this world. So I'm going to invite you to just a few minutes of a slideshow and suggest that perhaps there's something we might learn from the world around us. I'm offering you a quote from Hildegard of Bingen. Now, Hildegard, as you probably know, was born in 1098. She was a Benedictine abbess, a saint, an herbalist, a composer, a writer, a mystic, a polymath. It seemed there was nothing that that woman could not do. And she was so clear about this interweaving of all life. Everything that is in the heavens, on earth, and under the earth is penetrated with connectedness, penetrated with relatedness. So that is not a new phenomenon. This is known. It was known by our ancestors far long ago who had to understand all of what was going on around them, who had to use all their whole array of senses to be connected. Otherwise, they would not have survived and we would not be here. So in those 900 years since Hildegard wrote this, somehow we have come to believe in our Western culture, some subset of us have come to believe that humans are not related to nature, that we are distinct from and above. Well, let's look at some of the examples of what nature might have to tell us. These are coast redwoods, and perhaps you see the person in the bottom middle for scale. These are the tallest of all trees. I hope many of you have been to see them. They often exceed 300 feet in height. They are taller than a 30-floor skyscraper. These coast redwoods live along the coast, as their name implies. They live from Oregon to California, within 50 miles of the Pacific. They gather moisture from the fog, and that keeps them alive. But of course, because they are close to the coast, they are also subject to the wild storms coming in off the Pacific. Now, that can be problematic because they have a very shallow root system. So to be so tall with such narrow, small, tiny roots, how would they survive the ongoing storms of life? Well, they intertwine their roots. They, in essence, hold hands. The connections are mostly deeper than what we are seeing. They are not above ground. They are vast interconnections below ground. So you might imagine what it would mean to a grove of redwoods to lose even one tree. Let's go to the birch and fir. These are trees that were subject to exploration by scientist Suzanne Simard, who wrote Finding the Mother Tree. When she was right out of college, she went to work for the forestry industry in British Columbia. Their practice was to clear cut trees that were less valuable. So these paper birch trees with their beautiful bark were clear cut, systematically cut down, because the thought was that would improve the growth of the much more valuable fir trees. Yet Simard did not feel that everything was well with the trees. She could see that the fir, even despite the advantages that the forestry industry was trying to provide, were not thriving. So eventually she went on, got her doctorate, and she did these incredible surveys and studies to find that, in fact, birch and fir, growing in proximity to each other, were trading nutrients below ground, back and forth through the fungal network. So when the leaves of the birch, it's depicted on the right there, when the leaves of the birch shaded the fir in the summer, well, then the fir could not photosynthesize. So the birch went ahead and sent nutrients to the fir. In the fall, the birch would drop their leaves, and the needles of the fir then could access the sun and photosynthesize. So then the fir would send extra nutrients to the birch. The trees were collaborating for mutual benefit. We go to the beech forests in Germany. Like many forests, water and light may be unequally distributed. So there will be places within the forest where it's much more difficult for the trees to access the sun, places where less water is available to the roots. Well, what the trees have done is to offer nutrients from those who have more to those who have less. Now, why would they do that? Well, one reason is if any tree is lost, the forest opens up and moisture evaporates from the soil more quickly. Invasives grow. Deer come in to graze and nibble on the saplings. It's as if the trees know that to have a healthy forest, even the weakest members matter. But go to the Scots pine, and they could live for 600 to 700 years in a healthy forest. The older trees send nutrition to the young. And for the very old trees, they also receive nutrients. So a little bit of social security for those trees. Everyone belongs. Ben Rollins wrote a book called Tree Line about his travels around the world through the boreal forest, the northern forests of the world. And one of his remarks was how sad it was to see a lone pine. Well, indeed, Native Americans tell stories of lone pines speaking to them, asking that they plant other trees close by because they are lonely. So these have been some examples of connection and collaboration that might even be called living in communion among the beings, some of the beings around us, this way of being together in a deep and wordless unity. But how about people? This is sweetgrass. This is used in Native American ceremonies and weaving baskets. And we'll end with a story from Braiding Sweetgrass by botanist and a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, Robin Wall Kimmerer. She started the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment in New York. And the center was asked to provide some clarity about which method of harvesting sweetgrass was most beneficial and what was the least detrimental way of harvesting. So the group at the center studied 3 different stands of sweetgrass. One of them was harvested in, let's call it version A of a harvest. A second group was a different way of harvesting. And then the third was the control group. And it was left alone. Well, it might not be what most of us would think, but the failing plots, they were actually part of the control group. Those that were unharvested were choked with dead stems because harvesting stimulated growth and led to healthy stands of sweetgrass. So the finding was it didn't seem to matter too much how the grasses were harvested, only that they were. So we think about it, native peoples and sweetgrass evolved together as part of the same ecosystem. We're learning now that this was true for forests, estuaries, buffaloes, prairies. Living in harmony with attention to mutual well-being is possible. This is what Indigenous scholar Enrique Salmon has called concentric ecology, the idea that it's possible to live as kin. To even begin such kind of collaboration would, of course, require that we slow ourselves, that we come to our senses, pay attention, which, of course, in and of itself is a spiritual practice. It also requires that we change a mindset from othering. This is some of the most brilliant writing, I think, in these 4 sentences by writer, activist, and wise elder Joanna Macy. It's all alive. It's all connected. It's all intelligent. It's all relatives. Well, there's an invitation. There's an invitation to begin to imagine how we might reweave our connections, how we might attend to the living world around us. So, where do we find this wisdom? Well, I'm going to ask you to reflect on that a little bit, because the living world offers this guidance, the spiritual guidance and wisdom to us that reminds us that connection is not only possible, but invited. But indeed, we also have much of that wisdom and knowledge already embedded within us. So how might we reclaim that? So there are a number of spiritual practices that might invite us to reweave, but one is remembering what we already know. So that's what I'd like to invite you to right now. I'd like to suggest that you just take a few minutes as I'm going to ask some questions. If you're sitting there with a paper and pencil and you feel like you want to jot down any of this, you are most welcome to do that. But of course, you can just see what seems to be given to you. Let's begin by thinking about a time when you felt deeply connected to the living world around you. Maybe there was a sense of being woven into the larger world. Maybe you were stopped in your tracks by awe and wonder, and it was so immense, this awe and wonder, that that was all that showed up for you for moments or perhaps longer. Or maybe you had a longer term relationship with a particular tree or plant or bird, other animal, a mountain, a body of water. Were there any that seemed to be kin to you? So just allow that to come up for you. You don't have to sift through a lot. You can just notice one example of where you felt incredibly close and connected to the living world. And then you might note your senses. What were you seeing in that time? Was there a particular smell? What could you hear? Did you reach out to touch something? What colors were present? What shapes? What seemed to draw you in? And then you might notice if there was a way of being that you had in that time that allowed you to make this connection. What permitted your connection? What helped to enhance your connection in your attitude, your thoughts, your heart space? What made that possible? So you're going to be invited into a breakout room to share a little bit about your connection or your kinship as that seems right for you. No more than you feel is right for you to share. And as you share and listen to each other, just notice what feelings arise for you as you speak or as you listen to someone else share. Are there any longings or invitations or concerns or hopes that come up for you? So we're not making this a particularly complicated opportunity, simply noticing as you share the experience as it seems right. What do you notice? So a little about the process. It would be nice if you ask one person to be kind of a timekeeper so that you make sure that everybody has a chance to speak, and just have that one person help move the conversation along to the next person. No comments are necessary about someone else's experience, just the deep listening and noticing how that lands for you, so that when someone is speaking, your intention and attention is really on that individual and not what on you might want to say later. And of course, when it comes to the end, all you need to do is simply, if there are time, you can notice what seems to be showing up across all of the stories, or where you see some similarities.
Yeah, we're gonna do a little bit differently than usual at Movement Cafe. And we did a little differently last time too, where we all stayed together and chatted. We're gonna come back to hear a lot more from Leah. And so please, I know some people think, they're like, ooh, breakout rooms. I don't know about this. I invite you to have courage, and be present in the room. There'll be 3 or 4 people in the room with you, and then we'll all come back. And so this should be a really good time. And we will be coming back to have more conversation. So, are you ready? Here we go. Welcome back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back as we sort of breathe through our conversations. I hope you had many sacred conversations. Looks like we've got some folks hanging on in those breakout rooms. Here we go. Welcome back, Mary Beth and Lois. Welcome back, Bronwyn. So good to see you. Oh my goodness, I think here we go. And then everyone else. Welcome. Great to see everyone. I hope you had a holy and sacred time, maybe even a little grief, maybe a little joy in those rooms. And while I am welcoming you back, I'm also going to turn you right back over to our wonderful author and spiritual leader, Leah Rampy. And so I'm going to do that now. Go ahead, Leah.
Sure, thank you. Such fun to see everyone coming back. I wondered before we go on if there was anything that anybody wanted to share and noticing, not somebody else's story, of course, but anything you noticed out of your conversation, your time together, or perhaps your own reflection that might be, welcome to the whole. Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Clark. Judy's got her hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say something that came up kind of in our group toward the end was talking about the demands or needs of people versus the needs of nature in terms of housing, and particularly in urban areas where there's a real lack of housing or affordable housing, sort of the challenge of confronting developers to keep trees rather than going what would be the maybe easier route for them. Anyway, just kind of the dilemma there, and sort of being vigilant about that, having to protect nature, having to really work to protect nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how to hold that all. I mean, there's so much discernment is required, isn't it? On
Yes.
those, yeah. It's not just as clear as we might wish it would be. Yeah. Thank you, Judy. Anyone else had something you wanted to share and noticing? Yeah. I think thanks to those of you who are sharing. I'll try to give you a little bit more opportunity if there's something else that comes up as we move a little bit, but I'm also watching the time because it goes quickly when we're together. So let me just make a couple of points that have to do with my writing, but also that are building on what I invited you to do. So when I was sharing the slideshow with you, and when I was asking you to reflect, I was really encouraging you to think about that outward journey to connect to all of the living beings around you. That's a heart action, right? That opening our heart to connect to what is around us. But I want to be clear that there's also, and you're alluding to that in some of your comments, there's also this inward journey of heart and soul to connect to the sacred it is deep within us, all around us, and in which we are all held. And of course, anytime that we speak about that, I'm realizing that I make it sound like those are two separate and distinct processes or practices or journeys, when in fact it's all a part of a whole. We really, as we listen more carefully to creation and her wisdom, we also hear that echoed in our heart and soul. And as we connect more deeply to the sacred word written within us, we also connect more deeply to the world around us. So it is part and parcel of the same journey, even though words sometimes don't allow us to express that as fully as we might. Our language is imperfect. Our heart holds such incredible wisdom and really allows us this unlimited capacity for compassion. Our mind takes in and tries to frame and, compare and contrast, but this heart that we've been endowed with holds this deep wordless communion with the sacred, the holy, in all. Now, there is a risk, and you know it because of the work that you do and how you care about the environment around us and the injustice in which so many people are dealing with so many people are dealing with. When we open our hearts to be more deeply connected to the living world, it's hard and sad, and there's grief and there's heartbreak, because the loss is tremendous. And my sense is we have to face that loss fully. We can't dull our senses to try to ignore the loss of clear-cut forests or mountaintop removal or whatever the environmental injustice that you are personally working with. We can't dull our senses to that, because in dulling our senses to that, we dull them just for everything. And we break our connections even further when we do that. So it's a challenge and an opportunity to allow our hearts to break open even more, so that they hold more. They hold more grief and more beauty, more loss, more joy, more awe and wonder and delight. And to cultivate our spiritual heart, to learn to rely on it, and to even embrace that practice of bearing witness, so that we can look on the losses and acknowledge them and mourn them and lament. I know you have some lament practices that you all have been working with that I think maybe Rashonda will be talking a little more about. So that is one thing that we remember, that there are practices, but we also remember that grief is best held in community. Maybe that's human community. We can also take our grief to the living world around us as we create those rituals for lament. I think the other thing that we remember is a little bit about what Judy brought up, the importance of discernment, that we are always discerning what is ours to do. I used to think that discernment had a relationship to some major career move or some one-time important decision, until I read a little book that Rosemary Doherty wrote on discernment. And she reminded us that it is a way of living in the world, to be always discerning what is ours to do, that the revelation of the steps we are to take may not be a revelation of where those steps end. It may not give us the whole journey, but we are always open, present, available, connected, listening deeply for what is ours to do. So the more we plumb the depths of our soul and open to that richer, more complex understanding of what is ours to do, the more deeply connected we find ourselves in this fabric of the world. So I want to remind us, I want to take us back to the old woman weaving the world again and remind us that what she did when she saw the weaving in disarray, when she saw all of that work on the floor because it had been torn apart by the black dog, what did she do? She stopped. She paused. She waited on the threshold to see what might be given to her. Chaos brings endings and chaos brings beginnings. So what is the opportunity in that chaos? How do we pick up the threads and begin to reweave out of the grief and loss that we see? How do we claim that beauty and the joy and the awe and the wonder from this incredibly precious creation in which we are gifted to live? Well, I would suggest to you that that is a potential practice, standing still. I know that for many of us, doing seems like the number one opportunity that we have. As soon as we see a problem, we want to fix it and we want to jump right into it. But perhaps standing still, listening deeply, discerning what is ours to do, may in fact be what's invited. The Celtic Christians have a practice of what they call tuning the five-stringed harp. Those five strings are the senses. So what would it be like to wander in the woods and tune our senses, listening deeply to what is invited? Because we know that the Holy One speaks to us in many ways through plants and trees and birds and all beings. As Joanna Macy said, it's all alive, it's all connected, it's all intelligent, it's all relatives. So with that, I think I will give it back to you, Rashenda, and then if you can finish your pieces, and if you want to allow time for questions, that's fine, but let me give it to you and you'll see where that makes sense or not. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you, and thank you for being so gracious in your listening and in your sharing with each other.
Thank you, Leah. Oh my goodness. And thank you everyone for lifting. So that spiritual connection, I know that we are not a grove of trees because we are so far apart and we're not trees, but there is that sense, right? That when we are together here, that we're sharing nutrients with each other. And I'm really grateful for that. And I want to share a couple more resources. And just as Leah is, sort of helping us be mindful about what busy work is like, I'm going to share what is probably the busiest work resource that we have here on screen. And, I'm so grateful for this conversation because this resource is the first of three kind of talking about general conference legislation passed and how we can bring these to our churches. And you can see that we've tried to make this about the community that worked together to bring these things about. And it looks busy, doesn't it? Like the summary of the legislation and the author and the vote count. And those things are important to have a sense of, but there's also all this time for reflection to understand this work as sacred work, and to understand that we are called to it in, we talked earlier about what is salvation, right? The salvation of bringing people to Jesus Christ. And then what? Are we saving lives? Are we moving towards well-being? And so these different ways of working through this, and then the stories of the people who helped to create who helped with the work. Okay, so this is talking about lament. This is a prayer resource, and I'll show you the front in the moment. But this, during annual conference, during the prayers for creation, the climate vigil, we had hubs all over the country, and Reverend Laura Baumgardner leading that Zoom conversation as well as the worship in Charlotte. And we asked people to submit prayers and encouraged that by offering a cash prize for green teams. And I got this, in that mix of people who offered prayers for this resource was a pastor from Ethiopia. And he, in America, we're often so, unless the hurricane is coming down on us, right, or the forest fire is forcing evacuations, we're a little bit separated from climate change. And this prayer was written out of yet another devastating flood in East Africa, and the people that Reverend Masisa knows and cares about who are caught in the flood. And there's a little bit about how to use that prayer. He inspired me actually to write from the perspective of being in a forest fire, which unfortunately I have had, and also coupling that with praise of the forest. So there's ways of looking at this that we can be brave enough to enter into the prayers of lament, knowing that God is not finished, that this is the call to us, right? The call to be and act and work differently in the world. And so this is available also, and I'll drop these links for free. It's not a paid resource, but it's full of prayers inspired from Charlotte and what's happening in the world at that time. And so I'm going to stop sharing. And so I also want to share about the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And I'm going to drop some links too, and I don't want to drop them while I'm talking about the movement, the resources. The newsletter is usually just packed full of resources. And if you go back into the archives of the resources, you will find green teams, and I don't know that we've taken grief on fully, but there's lots of places, both working things and reflecting things available through that. And the resource library is where you're going to find also things like a summer book reading. And we didn't bring Leah here by accident. This is a wonderful book. She's from my perspective, she's managed to offer us a new way of being naturalists. Like, we've all read the naturalists, right? We've had them sort of forced upon us junior high. And I always chafed a little because it didn't seem whole enough to me. And I think Leah's trying to get there here, that there's so much invitation to wholeness and to look differently and be a different kind of spiritual, faithful naturalist. And that's what I really appreciated in this book. So if you don't have a summer study yet, I really recommend it. So we have just 2 minutes. We could take one question. If you had a question before we do our final reading, which will be our close today, is there anybody that has a question or that they'd like to ask before we head out? So seeing none, I have a question. Leah, in the last one of the later chapters, and I'm jumping ahead. If you do this, please don't jump ahead, because it's really important to get to this part through the book, but the stories of leadership and choosing our future. I think for this group, so many are leaders in this movement. Is there something we can take with us to drink in that helps us as leaders in how we choose the stories that will happen next? Small question.
Oh, yeah. And how to say that in 30 seconds, right? Well, first of all, I think you will all know the grounding of this because of your backgrounds. And that is, the grounding is it's not all ours to do alone. That we are a part of a larger dream, a larger whole for the earth and all beings. And it is ours to understand, to discern the work to which we are invited. And then we have to trust that everyone else is invited equally to do the best they can with the beautiful gifts that they have been given. And so too is all of Earth. Earth has an incredible amount of wisdom an incredible amount of agency and is leaning toward healing. And the best we do is to offer our gifts for the healing of all, ourselves included. And we hope then, we trust then, that we are part of laying the groundwork toward a future where mutual well-being is just an enormously innate and viable and real possibility for all.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Yes, I do believe it's so. This is part of the Christian faith, right? Who was it that said, "Hooray, we get to do this as people of faith"? That is an anchor and a ground for me. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to turn it over to Dawn, and Dawn has chosen a reading from the book, so you'll get a taste of how good it is. And I'm going to also be popping links in the chat. And if you have a link that you would like to share as well, please go ahead and do that as well. Go ahead, Dawn. Okay, so I think we're having computer issues. So you can see I've got a number of things that are all, but I think because I jumped ahead, I'm going to jump back and into the introduction. Now here, and of course, many of us who do spiritual work are very used to conversations around Iona, but I want you to know that that is not that there's so much. Leah touches on Iona, but she also touches on many, many countries and many, many different places where spirituality rises. But this is just where I landed in part. On the Isle of Iona, as well as other Hebridean islands, you'll find a unique ecotone called Macaire, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. It is a low-lying field formed when sand and bits of shell from the adjacent coastline are blown by strong ocean winds beyond the sand dunes and onto the land. Add just the right amount of rainfall and grazing animals, and you get an abundant pasture of plants and wildflowers. The flowers attract invertebrates, which in turn draw birds to the Macaire to feed and breed. The creks of elusive and nearly extinct corncrakes can sometimes be heard from their hiding places on the Macaire as they take a break from their long journey to their winter home in Africa. On Iona, the Macaire serves as a community pasture for sheep, an open-to-all golf course, and the pilgrim's route to St. Columba's Beach. As you walk the Macaire to the bay, each footstep is cradled by tiny wildflowers of buttercup yellow and daisy white. This thin place of wild sea, sky, and earth is harsh, rugged, beautiful, and fragile, susceptible to climate change, sea level rise, and increasing storms. This is one example of an ecotone on the edge. In this time on the edge, all of us, like the birds of the Macaire, are thrust into emerging ecotones that we have yet to fully understand, plunged into a changing environment unlike anything we have ever known. There is no going back for humans, plants, birds, insects, or mammals. It's much of the life we once knew has been or is being destroyed. We have arrived at the edge. We have arrived often more fully recognizing our soul purpose, SOUL purpose, and without the internal resources that we need for this chaotic time of unraveling the past and envisioning the future. Through no fault of our own, some of us will find ourselves in the path of destruction, and others will refuse to accept change and will cling too long to a disappearing past. Yet perhaps it's not too much to hope that some of us will answer our soul's calling and seek the transformation necessary to participate in a new vision for the well-being of all. Sorry. It's hard to read it. Amen. Can I get an amen? We are at time.
Amen.
Thank you, Leah.
Amen.
Thank you, Leah. Yes. And I did put some in the chat links, but we'll send more out too, even as we whew,
Amen, Michelle.
and yeah.
Thank you all. Blessings, blessings.
Thank you.
We'll see you all anon.